Welcome to our webinar, Reopening Hong Kong Vaccination and its Impact on Traveling, Part 2. My name is Sonia Young, and I'm the Head of Events and Marketing at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, a nonprofit, non-governmental organization that was created in 1977. Today, we have over 1,400 members representing nearly 300 companies, making us one of the most active international chambers in Hong Kong and one of the largest Canadian big business organizations outside of Canada. So what do we do exactly? CanCham delivers 4 services to our members: representation and advocacy engagement, business promotion, networking and brand exposure, learning and training, and information and insight. A few months ago, we brought you part 1 of this relevant discussion about travel and vaccines. If you missed part 1 on this topic, please visit our YouTube channel to watch this along with many of our past webinars. Today, we are bringing you part 2 of this discussion. As many of you know, in the past 24 hours, there have been some significant updates to travel policies between Canada and Hong Kong. We will also discuss digital health passports and the challenges surrounding everyone's desire to travel again. Moderating today is Todd Handcock, Asia Pacific President for Collinson, a leader in travel experiences and medical assistance. Collinson is the largest COVID-19 test provider in the UK, and as well as for leading organizations such as Singapore Airlines, Air Canada. He is also the head of the Chamber's Governors Council. Speaking today, we have GP and infectious disease epidemiologist, Dr. Sarah Borwein. Originally from Canada, Dr. Borwein has been practicing medicine in Hong Kong for over 15 years and was a frontline doctor in Beijing during SARS. From the airline industry, we have Han Lam, General Manager in Hong Kong of Southern China for Air Canada. An airline industry veteran, Han brings 15 years of experience to the table, having worked in operations, sales, and management in Cathay Pacific, British Airways, and Virgin Atlantic before joining Air Canada in 2019. We are also very excited to have Jennifer Ju Scott with us today. Listed as one of Forbes' top 50 women in tech in 2018, Jennifer is a leading expert in AI, blockchain, and other deep tech. Her latest project as executive chairman of the Commons Project is Common Pass, a digital health app that is at the forefront of efforts to revitalize international air travel. And last but not least, may I welcome the Honorable Bernard Chan, convener of non-official members of the Executive Council. We're grateful to have him with us today to give insight into the situation from a government perspective. So without further ado, I will hand over to Todd to begin this timely discussion. Enjoy.
It's great to be here again to help moderate part 2 of this discussion. And wow, what a 24 hours it's been. This is a day that many of us have been waiting for a very long time. A day that provides us with the possibility to travel to Canada and return to Hong Kong with much lower quarantine requirements. In fact, a combined 3 less weeks based on the announcements from the Canadian and Hong Kong governments in the past day. Absolutely incredible. Yesterday afternoon, the Hong Kong government announced a reduction to hotel quarantine for fully vaccinated individuals traveling from Canada to 7 days, Canada and many other countries. A few hours later, Canada announced 0 quarantine for fully vaccinated Canadians and individuals with right of entry to Canada with no quarantine. Now, it is important to point out that there are other requirements such as antibody testing that we'll be discussing today. This is absolutely a major milestone for both Canada and for Hong Kong and for those of us wanting to travel between the two. Since we last got together, we've been seeing global progress in the area of COVID-19 vaccinations. As of the start of June, 2.2 billion people around the world, or doses around the world, had been administered. And we're seeing that COVID-19 infections are continuing to fall in places with high vaccination rates, places like the US, UK, Israel, and of recent Canada itself. In Hong Kong, vaccinations are now available for almost all ages, everyone above the age of 12. With the announcement on March 15th, bringing an unexpected feeling of optimism for those of us who were waiting with bated breath for Hong Kong's vaccination roadmap, not the least for those of us in the travel industry, for the many Canadian expats wishing to visit home and see friends and family. However, despite the wide availability of vaccinations, low take-up rates both in Hong Kong and across the Asia-Pacific region as a whole, mixed with long quarantine periods and strict travel restrictions, have begun to cause many hopeful travelers to wonder whether the long-awaited restart of travel is still many months away. The developments of the past 24 hours has been a great step forward, but we still have the challenge of vaccination take-up rates here in Hong Kong, which will continue to impact the Hong Kong economy, impact the travel industry, and have an impact on anyone who needs to or wants to travel. So regardless of vaccinated population status, global operational complexities around digital health passports, from interoperability challenges to concerns regarding the use and storage of personal data, health passports remain a collective global issue to be conquered by all nations. So we're going to touch upon a number of these areas during our discussion today. And I want to kick off with the developments of the last 24 hours and pose a question to Dr. Sarah Borwein around the additional requirements that are coming. So even with the announced reduction of quarantine, we're seeing testing is still very much in play, even for fully vaccinated individuals. What role do you see robust COVID testing, much like what my company, Collinson, supplies globally, playing alongside vaccine rollouts as an enabler to international travel and continuing to reduce quarantines?
Yeah, I think it's going to be absolutely essential, particularly as long as we don't have a level of herd immunity in Hong Kong to protect the whole population. So you may be individually protected, but the rest of the population isn't. So testing is going to be really important to continue to protect those people in Hong Kong who are not yet vaccinated, which is quite a lot. So, and I think in order to keep the borders open, it's lovely to see the reductions, but in order for it to be maintained, we have to see that control is also continued to be maintained in Hong Kong of COVID. I think testing will be a very important part of that.
Now, Sarah, one of the tests that was announced yesterday by the Hong Kong government was the antibody test and guidance to have a pre-trip antibody test. What is the purpose of this, and what is the difference between a positive antibody test that's required by the Hong Kong government and the negative antibody test that's required by China?
It's all very confusing, isn't it? So the purpose in Hong Kong of the antibody test is, I guess it's twofold. It's one, to prove that you have been vaccinated, because we have people coming from all over with different vaccines being given. We don't know if some of them may have been given fake vaccines. We don't have a way of, so it's a way of ensuring that the person presenting themselves has in fact been vaccinated. There's no universal standard right now yet. Well, Jennifer will talk more about it, but for a vaccine passport. And so that's one thing. And it's also to make sure the vaccine has worked, that you have actually mounted an antibody response. It's not a perfect measure, but it definitely adds a level of kind of comfort to the fact that the person standing in the arrivals hall is indeed protected against COVID. So the test so that's an IgG test, and it's a specific test that's offered to the spike protein, which is, so it is for the vaccine. It is positive when someone's had a vaccine. There's another antibody test that is available. It's the one we used to offer, which is to the nucleocapsid. That one will only be positive if you've had the disease and not if you've had the vaccine. So we're not really doing that one anymore. We do the one for the vaccine. China has for some time been requiring a negative IgM test. So IgM is the antibody that you produce when you're acutely ill with COVID or even asymptomatic COVID. So it's only positive for a week or two. And it is another way of them ensuring that you don't have an acute COVID infection. So for China, you want a negative IgM test to show that you are not acutely infected. For Hong Kong, you want a positive IgG test to show that you are protected.
Right, okay.
And then Hong Kong, it will be combined with a PCR test to make sure that you also aren't infected.
Right, so it's a combination of testing requirements.
Yeah.
And Bernie, could you give a little bit of insight in terms of why Hong Kong has included this addition of the antibody test requirement? I think Sarah started to touch upon it, but from the Hong Kong government perspective, of why add another layer of testing?
Thanks, Todd. Well, first to start with, I'm sure many of you asked the same question again and again. Why are we having such a different standard from the rest of the world. For many other countries now, a fully vaccinated person, basically you're free, you do anything you want. So why are we still holding up with all these different requirements, including the latest antibody test? By the way, I understand that we are probably the only city or country that using antibody tests is a entry requirement. Now it's all have to do with China, right? Because our number one priority for Hong Kong today is to reopen with the mainland of Hong Kong. Now it is open, the border is not shut. It's just that they have a heavy travel restrictions with quarantine and essentially shut down our economy. So our number one priority right now for Hong Kong, although Hong Kong is a gateway to the world, we should be also connecting to the world. But China is clearly a very important part of our economy. So, and we need to meet the China standard. China hold a very high standard for Hong Kong or for the rest of the world right now. I mean, basically they adopt zero tolerance, right? And that's why for months now in Hong Kong, we are try to drive our local new case to zero. I know it doesn't sound logical for many countries, but it is what it is. This is what we need to do before we can even start any dialogue. By the way, the latest news yesterday, Todd, I don't know if you read on, I'm not sure it's in the English news, but definitely in the Chinese news. So we started the dialogue with Macau because we have now 13, 14 days with no new case, right? So we finally got a shot to start the dialogue with Macau. And guess what was the conclusion? You hear about this? Now, so they say, okay, good, you guys are doing well, but okay, let's wait another 14 more days. So they basically said, until you have no new case in 28 days, we can start talk about opening up the border with Macau. We're not even talking about the mainland China. So I mean, it's so frustrating, right? So meantime, I have friends in UK, Canada, US, yelling at me and thinking, you guys are crazy in Hong Kong. It's not practical to have zero case. But yet, look at what Macau is doing to Hong Kong. 28 days, 0 case before they even want to open that border. And because of that backdrop, because it's important why I need to explain this, why this is so important for us to try to control the inbound cases, which is what affecting most of us on the call right now, international travel, because we need to control the inbound case in order to keep our local new case to zero, basically. So just a little bit of updates, since some of you may not know this latest number. I only found out this morning, by the way, because in preparation for this call, I ran up and tried to find out a little bit more. So in the past 2 weeks in Hong Kong, from June 7th to June 20th, we have total of 28 cases. Of the 28 cases, 27 are imported and only 1 local case. By the way, we still haven't found out how this one case, this 17-year-old girl, get this virus. Anyway, so we have 27 imported cases. Of the 27 imported cases, 17 of them have found with the so-called VOC, I'm sure Sarah knows better than me. These are the variants, the mutated cases. It's the 17, including returnees from the UK. Now, I mean, I don't know how, apparently there are different types of variants. So as of June 20th, total of these variant mutated cases in Hong Kong, so far we have received 390. Out of the 390 cases, 150 cases are with the alpha mutation. We're not allowed to call the country anymore. So alpha is the first country, in case you wonder where it comes from. Alpha is 150 cases and 50 cases with beta, and 41 cases with Delta. And apparently the Delta one are highly transmittable. And that is the one that is actually what is troubling Singapore. Singapore will in recovery, but because they have this Delta variant, so they're still not able to contain it. And this is one reason why Hong Kong government is so nervous about is have to make sure that we can control these Delta variant coming into Hong Kong. Because once they come to Hong Kong, then I mean they are coming back, but we can stop them at the hotel. We can at the these unreasonable 14-day, 21 days quarantine. Hopefully we can track them and address them and cure them. and not letting it pass our so-called control into the community. Because once you're in a community outbreak, then forget about talking about any border relaxation with China. So just to give you some background, why all the fuss, it's all because of this so-called VOC, these variants that get all our scientists crazy about it. Anyway, going back to your question about antibody. So apparently, there are going to be two types of, it's not that, I'm not talking about type, it's the two different treatments of antibody tests for people coming back. The first type are people like you and I, those people from Hong Kong. Now, because you can get a test in Hong Kong, right? And by the way, you should get a test in Hong Kong first before you leave, because it makes a difference. I'll tell you why. So you get that test, and as Sarah put it, there's only one time. I just got mine done too, by the way, and I hope that it's the same one that Sarah, you said that it should be the one. You need a positive. I have 310, by the way. That's the number I got. So you must get that test before you leave, because if you, let's say you go back to Canada with that test in hand, upon your return, all you need is 7 days quarantine, provided you're vaccinated. You're fully vaccinated with 2 shots with the antibody test. You leave Hong Kong, and upon your return from Canada, 7 days. That is one treatment. There's going to be another treatment for those who are coming from Canada for the first time. Now, I'm still talking about Hong Kong residents, but residing in Canada. Upon their return to Hong Kong, they cannot have the test done in Canada and bring it back to Hong Kong. Cannot. We do not recognize them. Okay, so they will be tested upon arrival, right? So in other words, so Han, for Air Canada point of view, you still require them to book a 14 days hotel, assuming that they got 2 shots. If they don't have 2 shots, then it's not even 14 days more, right? So if they have fully vaccinated, you still have to get your 2 weeks hotel confirmation, and upon arrival, they will test you with the antibody, and you are likely to put in the hotel, wait for the result. When the result came positive, then your quarantine time will be reduced to 7 days. Okay, and that's for those who are coming in for the first time, because we do not recognize antibody tests done outside Hong Kong. But for those of us in Hong Kong, no problem. You test in advance first, you bring it with you, and you come back, and you'll be all clear. So now, by the way, this is the most latest, and I believe that the official detail has not been announced. So those of you guys, amazing. You picked the right timing for this conference call, because you're hearing pretty much everything for the first time now, because all the detail has not been released yet, but it's something like that in the pipeline, and we'll be announcing very soon. But I'm sorry, I forgot to mention too. The first, this is all in, I'm sure we're still testing everything out, right? So right at the beginning, I don't know how long, but at least in the initial couple of weeks, I guess, or month, first month, will only apply to those who are from Hong Kong, leaving Hong Kong. So those who are coming from Canada for the first time, sorry, we still have to work out all the teething issue first. So none of those, because all the logistics still work it out. So I think it may not come like immediately, but it will come a few weeks later. But for those of us from Hong Kong, yes, you can leave. I think the earliest they're announcing is the end of this month. So you can start booking your flight now with Air Canada on July 1st. For those of Hong Kong going back to Canada and coming back. Todd.
Thanks, Bernie, and I want to say thank you as well, because I know in the background you've been instrumental in trying to work through a lot of what's been going on, and we'll talk a little bit about that later with Jen. And I do want to circle back on a couple of things you talked about. One of them was around the economy, and the other one around the Delta variant and the vaccination rates. But I want to come back actually to the antibody test, and another question for Sarah. How long is such a test valid? So the Hong Kong government saying you have to come back within 3 months, get the test beforehand, and then 3 months. How long is that valid? And then I guess the second part of that question is, when I go to get my pre-departure, say, PCR test, if I'm going to Canada, can I get my antibody test at the same time? Is the turnaround time the same?
Yeah. in terms of how long it's valid for, we don't know. We know the Hong Kong government is going to accept 3 months. How long that's actually, I think Hong Kong may be used for a lot of data mining and to do some studies on this, because we will actually produce very good data about that. But right now we don't know. We do know, and Bernard, I don't want to bust you, but I know which vaccine you had by your levels. So, because my level,
I can tell you,
16,000. So and so obviously that if your level is very, very high, it'll take longer to decay and go down to an undetectable level. There's a question in the chat box about what's the level considered positive, and that level is, I think, 50 Australian AUs per milliliter. So most people have had vaccination actually have much higher levels than that.
I want to follow up on that. Yeah, I got the Sinopharm, which is not available in Hong Kong. I have mine done in Shenzhen back in late January. So I suspect that my level must have been, well, 600-700 or something like that in the start, but it depletes over time, right? You will know better than me, Sarah. But now I'm 310. Now I understand if you have taken, bound 10 others, easily 1,000 plus and above. But you're right. I think I asked the same question to the authority. It's like, wait a minute, what is the minimum level? He said anything above 50 is good enough, right? So whether you're 300 or 10,000, no
Doesn't
difference.
matter.
You have cover. You have protection. Is that right? So yeah.
That it's only a kind of proxy for protection, that number. So, and there, as far as we know, I think that's the best answer. It's not certain, but as far as we know, there's other kinds of immunity from the vaccine that we can't measure. So this is what they're using.
Right.
Oh yes, that's correct. 50 is the cutoff.
Okay. Maybe before I move on to another question, there was a question in the chat which was around adults traveling with minors. Bernard, I believe that right now that is still being worked through by the Hong Kong government, and how that's going to
be unfortunately, Todd, I see this question coming, so I asked this in advance. Unfortunately, to our health official, they are not yielding to this. They think, especially, they have now found UK returnees, very minors coming back with the VOC, with the variant mutation. So unfortunately, yes, I think unfortunately, if you travel with minors, and then I'm afraid that 21 days, in fact, it's not even 14 if because your minor is not vaccinated, right? So 21 days or 14 days, depending on where you come from. So that, and I don't see that would change at all for now, until I guess at a time when the whole world got enough of a herd immunity, right? Again, this is an area Sarah know better than me, because right at the moment, I don't see they have any plan to change that to even
I think it would
minors.
change if Hong Kong had a good level of it. If we had 75% coverage, then they might feel comfortable.
Probably, yeah.
But we don't have anywhere near that.
Right. Okay. And in Canada, I know that at this point, the Canadian government is saying that that children would still have to home quarantine for 14 days, even though their parents could actually be out of quarantine. So slightly different situation there. Han, a question for you. The news of the past 24 hours is something I know that you've been waiting for many, many months. Have you seen a surge of bookings overnight?
Well, we have been waiting for this news for such a long time now. We have been talking about this for so long. I mean, it really feels like, is it really going to happen? Now, finally it did. To answer your question, no, we haven't actually seen a huge amount of bookings coming through over the night yet. And I think that's down to a couple of things. I think the first thing is that the Canadian government doesn't recognize the Sinovac vaccine. There's only 4 vaccines that the Canadian government is going to recognize. And the other more serious and more worrying issue is that, some countries, for the case of Canada, they're recommending the mixing of different makes or manufacturers of vaccines. So you can do a BioNTech and then followed by AstraZeneca or vice versa. And we just learned from the Hong Kong government as of yesterday that they are not going to recognize that to be considered as fully vaccinated. So you need to have 2 vaccines of the same type. So that's going to discourage a few people, and that's going to put up bookings and people's intention to travel a bit of a sidestep. And I think, it's up to us to then, lobby with the government to look at, is there a way to synchronize measures like that? I think that's a political question and a scientific question. And the government's intention to have an antibody test as a measurement is also interesting. So I really hope that antibody tests will in some way help us to foster mutual recognition of vaccines between borders, because in the end of the day, it is the antibody that matters.
Right. I think that's
Can
really
I,
good.
Todd,
Sorry. Yes, Bernard.
I just like to comment on this. Now, by the way, all the decisions on antibody and testing, everything is all done by this group of scientists, not by Hong Kong government. Of course, it's a recommendation from the group of scientists and a medical profession to the government. So, and I understand that there's been talk about mixing up the vaccines too. So I won't, Han, I would say that as things continue to develop, I think this could be a potential, because there's already some talk about mixing the two. Even in China, they're talking about maybe the booster shot, using mRNA as a booster shot. All these things are ongoing, but the point is everything is so new, right? So I think, well, at least our scientists in Hong Kong, they are far more conservative. So they are not really want to jump into it right away. But that's definitely, I think the idea is not entirely strange to them. I think everyone is looking at everybody else as more proof comes along. I think that can happen, but probably not at this moment, but giving some more time, things will eventually, I think, I really do believe that the whole world will eventually recognize everybody else's vaccine, because you cannot imagine that there's a, vaccine politics here, because vaccines are no longer just regional. I mean, it's being used by different countries everywhere. So I think eventually everyone will come to some sort of agreement, and hopefully something like a common path can connect us.
That's a great segue into a question I was going to ask Jen. So Jen, recently on CBC, Boris Johnson was interviewed, and he was talking about digital health passports being discussed at the G7. And he actually revealed that he felt that the collective global response to the pandemic was reminiscent of the Tower of Babel. We're talking about that right here, right? I mean, Canada's got its roster of accepted vaccinations. Hong Kong does. We've got the question about mixed vaccines, etc. You were recently quoted in Fortune saying that even with all the vaccines and fast COVID testing, we still rely on old methods like quarantines, because country A can never trust country B. So to what extent is a lack of trust and collaboration between governments behind the slow progress that's being made in relationship to developing global health passport standards? And maybe further on that, Johnson mentioned that the aim of the G7 moving forward is to implement global protocols. So, not dissimilar to what Bernard has just said, we will eventually get there. How far away are we from that reality?
Thank you, Todd. First of all, I do hope that we will have some time to talk about Bernie's contribution. I think Bernie is the unsung hero for all of us, how we got here. So I would like to offer a piece of bad news, and then some reality, and then some hope and good news. So the bad news is that we've been looking very closely with all the data of vaccine rollout globally. And based on our calculation, and this is confirmed with CDC as well, that the world would not reach herd immunity, global herd immunity, for another 4 years with the current vaccination rollout pace, especially when we look at Hong Kong. It's so easy, and you can even win a Tesla or apartment, and people still not picking up vaccine. This is very disconcerting, because as long as Sarah would know this much better than I do, but as long as the virus is passing through population, there's always chance to have some more variants. And every time you have a new variant, it's always a new race. So I think, getting vaccine is not only just for yourself, it's really for the global community. So therefore, I think, everybody on this call should really not be neutral about getting vaccine. So the reality is that because we're going to be in this for so long, therefore, we have to shift our mindset from this kind of zero tolerance, medically airtight, to the mindset of resilience. How can we build resilience to coexist with this COVID safely? And one thing about, COVID is it really lays bare that the world lacks the right kind of digital infrastructure and lacks the right kind of institution to build this kind of digital infrastructure for people with all the testing and all the vaccine and now antibody. How do you prove you have done? And how do you prove to your all kind of test and vaccine done in location A is recognized in location B? So if WHO last year started to say we're going to set a global data standard and everyone you can build a solution and based on this data standard, I think we will be in a much better place, but that did not happen. So in the Commons project, we've been working with Microsoft, the Mayo Clinic, et cetera, in the US to try to build smart health cards through our vaccination credential initiative. I'm very pleased to share that we have made quite a lot of progress in the past few days. So Apple at the WWDC a week ago announced that they are adopting a smart health card. And we also have California state government also announced they're adopting smart health card standard, and which is the, Common Passes use a smart health card standard. And we also have Louisiana and Hawaii. Hawaii government actually signed an agreement with us to use Common Pass as a requirement to prove your vaccination record in and out of the island. In addition, from last Friday, that if you in the US received vaccine from Walmart, and you will be able to get your digital vaccine records through Common Pass and Common Health, which is the two products we produced in the US. And CVC as well as Walgreens will be the next as well. So we are in process, obtaining 150 million vaccination records in the US. Now, what does that mean for Hong Kong and Canada? Because of Bernie's support, and I really couldn't have done this without Bernie's support. So we have been very closely collaborating with the Department of Innovation and Technology under Secretary Alfred Sett. And Hong Kong, in fact, now is ahead of the curve in terms of compared to many destinations in the world. We actually just completed to make Hong Kong Health Code to be smart health cards compatible. And therefore, we have built this function that if you have your vaccination records or your testing records in I Am Smart in Hong Kong, you will be able to use Common Pass. Once you're done on Common Pass, you'll be able to use Common Pass to scan the QR code and turn that into smart health cards format in Common Pass. And therefore, you can carry that to many different destinations and be able to recognize. We have been talking to Canadian government as well, and Canadian government will accept to use Common Pass for land travel from US to Canada. The next step, we have to collaborate with Hong and many others and Cathay, et cetera, to make sure Hong Kong and Canada is working as well. Now, I think what we have learned, now we're working with more than 30 governments around the world, and Todd, you're absolutely right. I think there has been a lot of talk from governments in terms of building interoperability, global standard. But if we take a look at the reality of the global geopolitical situation, I don't think that kind of agreement will be achieved anytime soon. However, I do think through our approach, in addition to nation states, we also approach this kind of digital state, right? You will count that Apple's iOS universe is a very big digital state. With that kind of approach combined with the nation state, we will be able to, broaden and make this standard, smart health card standard, universe bigger and bigger. And Hong Kong will be one of the first destinations, being compatible with that standard. So what happens, when we start to travel is, I think Hong Kong citizen will be able to continue to use I'm Smart in Hong Kong for whatever functions required. But once you go international, you can use Common Pass as a kind of global standard translation layer.
Wonderful. And just taking that back to the comments you made on Canada and across the US border, good progress. Now, Canada yesterday announced that we'll have to upload our vaccination records into the Arrive Can app. Do you see that as being the Common Pass as being that layer in the future between, say, the IM Smart app and the Arrive Can app, or would it just be potentially Common Pass that Canada would accept into the future without having to upload into the Arrive Can app?
Yeah, good question. So we are actually a very small team. We have less than 100 people globally, and right now doing probably 1,000 people worth of work. So none of us are sleeping, and our approach is that there's no way we will be, or any company will be able to provide a local solution for every country, and therefore our job is to bring standards and also bring interoperability. So domestically, whatever solution every country use, but similar to Hong Kong, if you will be able to be, either we ingest the record into Common Pass or become interoperable or integrated with Common Pass, and therefore when you go overseas, you will be able to use Common Pass as kind of translation layer. So domestically, we have domestic solution. Internationally, we hope to use Common Pass as kind of a harmonized, standardized solution that can be recognized by many destinations.
Okay, good. And as individuals, I know there's concern out there around data protection with regards to health passports, various health passports. How are we going to overcome this concern?
Again, very good question. Have you noticed that Facebook is not making a lot of progress on any kind of a health pass? So I mentioned earlier that it really is fair that the world doesn't really have the right kind of institution, right? The technology has become such transformative power for every aspect of our life, and yet all the digital services is really provided by a handful of your large tech companies or some very tech savvy, governments, right? If we are thinking about something that would be able to be accepted beyond geopolitical differences and beyond commercial competitiveness between tech companies, therefore it has to be an organization that's neutral and that doesn't, it's not controlled by any state and it's not controlled by any tech company. And that's why, as a very small and yet quite new organization, we're getting disproportionate importance is precisely because right now there isn't the right kind of institution. So we at the Commons Project approach privacy and data protection really, coming from the governance level. And we actually launched the project before the pandemic without knowing there's a global pandemic upon us. With the very firm belief that individuals should control their health data. And that's why we chose a very tough path to be nonprofit. And therefore, there won't be any VC investors or shareholders behind us to pressure us to monetize the data. And then from technology point of view, we use very decentralized approach. And we treat every individual's phone as a microservice. So none of your PII, which is personal identifiable information, will leave your phone. And also our other approach includes data minimization. Any of the app, especially the free apps you download these days, they go the opposite way, right? They collect a lot of irrelevant data because that's how they generate money. So we use data minimization, and not only just in terms of type of data we generate, but also in terms of how long we keep those data. We also, make sure that individual, instead of every time when they transact, every transaction of the data reading 15 pages of terms and conditions. No lawyers, well-trained lawyers will understand. We make it very explicit and very clear, so individuals understand when they, especially translating between, different health data wallets, and what does that mean to their health data, who want access to their health data. So my hope is that, of course, this global pandemic is a very sour lemon for all of us. Many people are suffering, but if we could take this global pandemic and create a new norm that individual can actually control and manage their health data through our effort, then that's a very sweet lemonade.
Thanks for that, Jen. Han, on the same subject of health passports, I mean, obviously important for the airline industry to get this right, and the interoperability, connectivity into distribution systems, front-end check-in systems, websites, etc. Where do you see this going? What are the conversations that's happening with the airline industry? Obviously, Common Pass is part of that conversation. The IATA Travel Pass is part of that conversation. Verifly in the U.S. with American Airlines is part of that conversation. There's a number that are out there, and the Common Pass and the likes of IATA, the ones that are I guess non-commercial NGO type ones probably have have the best position because of the approach they're taking. But what's the conversation with Air Canada and the other airlines, and how do you see this moving forward for you?
Yeah, I mean, Jen touched upon a lot of important points. I mean, data privacy extremely important. So our primary consideration is to minimize the operational complexity of the operations of our check-in services. Because if you can imagine, right now, if you go to Canada, if you are non-Canadian, it is quite a clunky process, because you have to bring your paper, you have to bring your proof of your marriage to a Canadian citizen, etc. Now, if you overlay that with your vaccination records and other antibody tests, it becomes a half-an-hour conversation at the check-in counter. Now, if we really do believe travel will recover to what it was, we need to automate that. We need to put that online. We need to make that as seamless as possible. So, with the likes of Common Pass and even the IATA Travel Pass, that is actually coming at exactly the right time for us. So from our perspective, it is about integration with our check-in system. So every single airline uses a different system. So in our case, we use Amadeus, and many other airlines use Amadeus as well. And that houses a lot of our customer data, who they are, their nationality, and etc. And then we have to build in a lot of different health rules into the system that will integrate with the health borders, such as where are they coming from, where are they traveling to, what's the nationality, what vaccines would be recognized at their destination, etc. We have to compute all of that into the system, and then draw the data from the health wallets with likes of Common Pass, and then integrate that into our check-in system. So we need to integrate both data sets together, so that as a consumer, if you check in, you don't really notice any difference in terms of, okay, I need to bring a whole folder of papers to the check-in counter. So that is not going to happen if we are ever going to recover. Our objective is really to integrate both the health wallets and our check-in system in order for us to have a very easy self-service proposition that will work on our app, on our website, etc. And I think we also cannot forget the fact that we do connect with other airlines. So it's not just one airline's decision. We need to work with our European airline partners, some airlines in Asia who we have a close connection with. So it will take some time. So this is why these conversations are happening, and different airlines are doing their own trials. We're doing our own proof of concept. But we would rather make sure that we are going to have a solution that will work and robust in order to protect the operation and to make sure that customer service can be what it was pre-COVID, even though we are capturing a lot more data now.
Can I add that I think Han is absolutely right? I think we are integrated with Amadeus, and for people who are not in, I only learned how to pronounce Amadeus about a few months ago because
It's Spanish.
I mean, we never really in the travel industry, right? And we thought, how digital health is really broken, but travel industry is so complex. My God. I think in addition to airlines, we cannot, just because air travel is probably the most urgent, right now, especially for us here in Hong Kong. Anywhere you go, apart from going to mainland China or Macau, you just have to take airplane. But for the world to really reopen, we have to have a kind of a transportation agnostic approach. It's not only just airlines, right? You have to go into cruises, you go into the events, and essentially, I think that the most important common denominator is how can we build tamper-proof, privacy-preserving, individual, person-based, this kind of health data management system, and use this kind of health data management system to enable safe people's movement during COVID, regardless you going, take a plane or train or, cruise or going back to a concert, right?
Thanks, Jen. Bernie, Han was talking about collaboration between airlines. I mentioned Boris Johnson talking about a G7 that they were talking about it. Is the same thing happening in the Asia Pacific region? Is the Hong Kong government talking about e-passport, collaboration, etc., across different Asia Pacific countries, regions?
We had those conversations for months now. I mean, it's not that we only now start talking. We've been talking to them for quite some time. In fact, initially, we want to develop this so-called travel bubble with 5 countries, but all 5 of them turned us down because they were not ready. All 5 of them. Just to name the 5: Thailand, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea. None of them were ready for us. And of course, then came Singapore. And then when Singapore is ready for us, we weren't ready, and when we are ready, they are not ready. So I think this is going to be ongoing, and obviously, I think Asia Pacific will be a good start for us because they're all relatively low risk. So it's something that I think we can start the bubble easily with. So that is still our aim. Now I know some countries are a bit more creative. Thai government, for example, they want to designate Phuket as a bubble itself. So they want to have a bubble just between Phuket and Hong Kong. I don't know how far that conversation is because I suspect that Hong Kong side may be a bit concerned of, well, how exactly you control that bubble. I mean, how do we know for sure that nobody from Bangkok or elsewhere can come through that bubble to Phuket? So that sort of thing, right? But I think every country have to start looking at reopening, right, one way or the other, because the economy is greatly suffer. So they all try to figure out a way how we can do it safely, but you have to mutually agree, right, between country to country. I know the EU is also looking to open back to Hong Kong, so that is very hopeful as well. But it's still subject to individual country within the EU to decide and to put additional conditions to that so-called opening. So it's ongoing. But I think there's a genuine desire that everybody wants to return back to normality. But I'm actually, I am saddened with the bad news given by Jan. We're still another 3-4 years away. But I don't know. That might change though. I mean, the latest things I hear now, China is ramping up their vaccination so fast that they are even moving up the timing. I mean, initially we're talking about the end of the year. Now they might even reach 70% by September, end September. So who knows? I mean, Sarah, if China is leading the way in Asia, maybe it would somehow push all the other Asian countries to follow, right? Because you want to open back to China, and you want to travel to China, you really need to be vaccinated. Because by then China will be safe, right? I assume. I don't know how. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure how this so-called herd immunity works, but sounds good. If they can reach 70% by September, then maybe I hope we don't have to wait 4 years.
Yeah, it's an interest. We're at a really interesting time, I think, because I think what's happened is all the countries, China, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Hong Kong, all these countries that have managed to really do a good job containing or controlling COVID are now having a really difficult time navigating out of it, right? Because number one, our populations don't see the need for vaccination. They haven't experienced prolonged severe lockdowns or the ravages that COVID itself can do. So they don't understand the need for it. And we're going to have to let go, China too, of zero COVID in order to get out. So it's like a tightrope we're going to be walking between releasing restrictions and keeping the population safe. And it's like vaccinations like the guide wire that you can hold to walk across the tightrope, but it's still not going to be perfectly safe. And we're going to have to, all countries are going to have to accept that, because even 70% herd immunity, that won't guarantee no COVID outbreaks. There will still be outbreaks and there will still be cases, and we're going to have to accept that. But what we won't have is our hospitals overwhelmed and people dying in great numbers. We should be able to protect the vulnerable people. We should be able to prevent hospitals from being overloaded. And I think that's what Jen was referring to, in the sense that we have to learn to live with the virus ultimately. And that hasn't been the line that countries in Asia have taken. Quite rightly, it was a good policy to try and get down to zero when we didn't have a vaccine, but it's not a way to get out of it. We can't live in bubbles forever. And to get out of the bubble, we're going to have to take some risks.
So I'd like to actually circle back to something Bernie had talked about earlier, which was impact on the economy. There's been recent commentary about Hong Kong having lost approximately 40,000 jobs. That a lot of them were travel and tourism related, et cetera. Looking forward, Bernie, with what we've just talked about, the low vaccination rates in Hong Kong, and we're still low 20s, I guess it is as of today. What do you see happening for Hong Kong over, let's say, the next 12 months, and will we be able to retain Hong Kong's status as an international trade hub if places like Europe and the US and Canada and others start opening up faster than, say, Hong Kong does?
The latest number now is we have over 26% received the first dose, 26%. I think the number will continue to go up, but I honestly don't believe that it will go past 50% just on our own. I don't think that even with the flats and all the lucky draw, it's not going to get us over 50% on our own. But I think the pressure will mount on us, as I said, when China opens up. You want to travel to China, you need to be vaccinated. You want to travel to the rest of the world, you need to be vaccinated. So unless we want to stay in this little island forever, I mean, soon, I think the rest will come along, but not immediately, because as Sarah put it, and there's no urgency, right? Nobody feels the urgency, but that urgency will come over time. Now, the question now you asked correctly is, well, how long would that be, right? Now, but the key is first we open to China. Not only we are losing a lot of the multinational executive from Hong Kong, because they can't be stuck in Hong Kong, they move out of Hong Kong, but equally we are losing a lot of executives that do most of the work in China, right? So a lot of financial PE firms they move the people back to Shanghai and Beijing because most of the activities in the mainland, so they need to travel. So one way or the other, we need to open to one end at least. Right now we're sort of like the worst of two ends. We're not open up to anybody, to anyone. So we are losing people. So we must able to reconnect back with the mainland. So at least there's a reason and motivation for people to get vaccinated. So that's. But unfortunately, it will take time. Now, Singapore might be a little bit ahead of us in terms of the numbers, but I mean, they have their own problem as well. So I'm not so sure that, I don't think, because Asia Pacific done so well, too well, and to the point Sarah put it, we all now struggle trying to figure a way how do we get out of this whole bubble, this regional bubble on our own. So it's a struggle, but I think we all know this can't go on forever because it's hurting the economy, hurting the businesses. By the way, I saw a question. I thought I need to answer that question. I saw in the chat box asking whether there's any chance of a home quarantine. Let me just be clear. If you dial back to a year ago, we start off with home quarantine. It was never meant to be hotel quarantine. But when we had that so-called home quarantine, we were questioned, the public questioning us, the media were questioning us about, how we, and the enforceability, how do we enforce them? Because we found people with the bracelet walking around town. It was because of under that criticism, right, that the government had no choice and mandatory putting everybody into hotel, right? But it always started with home because it's not, really humane to put people in a hotel for such extended period of time. But because of the environment of Hong Kong, living condition, Hong Kong, it's no, sure. I mean, if you live in the south side of Hong Kong with a big house, sure, you can home quarantine, but most people don't live in those conditions. So an outbreak can happen if we have one or two people, decided to run away, right? By the way, someone also asked me, can we put a electronic bracelet, something that Canadian government put on one jaw, right? I said, sorry, all these so-called paper bracelet we use are not GPS related. There's no tracker. We don't track people. And by the way, even if you have a tracker, it's too late. If the person infected got out, by the time you found them, it's already too late if there's an outbreak, right? So anyway, because of this zero tolerance mentality, I don't think they will allow home quarantine anytime soon for returnees from overseas.
Okay, with just a few minutes left, I am just going to continue on with some of the questions from the chat. One of them was just looking for clarification in terms of traveling to Canada, traveling back. So clarification is, if you're fully vaccinated with one of the vaccines that Canada accepts from Hong Kong, that's only the BioNTech at this point in time. PCR test before flight, PCR test on arrival, then you can have no quarantine. Children not vaccinated still have to do the quarantine. Coming back to Hong Kong, still a pre-flight test, an on-arrival test, plus the antibody test that we were talking about earlier. If that antibody test is positive, then it's only 7 days hotel quarantine. So the bottom end of that question is it's not that there's no quarantine when you get back to Hong Kong. There is still 7 days of positive. And if coming from Canada in negative, it's 14 days into that hotel quarantine. There's some other questions here.
Todd,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Todd. I think you mentioned the BioNTech. Hong Kong government, we accept all vaccine recognized by WHO. So it's not just BioNTech. I don't know what vaccine being used in Canada, but anything
the Canadian side will only accept BioNTech at this point in time. Only the ones that they've approved in Canada will they accept as a test, as a vaccine coming into Canada. There's a question here around taking comments on zero tolerance policy for now versus a more risk-based approach to opening up. I think you touched a little bit on that earlier, Bernard, and the fact that China is saying zero cases, Macau is saying 28 days, 0 cases, puts the Hong Kong government a little bit of a challenge in terms of taking more of a managed risk approach. That would be correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Then there's another question here. Why does the HKSAR not take into consideration that giving even more incentives to those fully vaccinated to encourage opening up? Example, including no need to quarantine at Penny's Bay or hotels, if close contact or travel, but allow quarantine at home, and also the threat of catching a virus if not vaccinated given opening up. So I guess the question is really around how to incentivize people more to actually get vaccinated.
Todd, you need another session to go through all this. No, I think we are working to that direction. I think the chief executive just announced yesterday further relaxation using this whole vaccine bubble concept. Yes, church can return to 100%, provided 2/3 of the churchgoers needs to be vaccinated. All these are coming. Exactly. Even like big I'm the chairman for Trail Walker event. So we are now currently in negotiation with the government as well of hosting this mega event. But I'm pretty sure the requirement will be, again, based on vaccination. So if all participants are vaccinated, I think we can go back to the maybe not go back to 3,000 people, but at least a couple hundred to 1,000 people is doable, but provided they are vaccinated.
Right. Okay. And we're at the top of the hour, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap it up. It's been a fantastic session, a lot of really good conversation. We have, I'm sorry, more questions coming in here, but this is a series that we had committed to keep on going. So I'm sure we will have another discussion in the not too distant future around this as things unfold. But I want to say a really strong appreciation for our panelists today. It was a really good conversation. I think there's a lot of real interest in what's going on, and as Bernard called out, we were perfect in our timing relative to the announcement both from the Canadian government and the Hong Kong government in the past 24 hours. So thank you again for everyone joining. I'll give one last plug. I know that Air Canada is just about to announce a 10% promotion for Canadian Chamber of Commerce members. So please watch out for that in the next few days. But thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.